people have traveled a long ways to be in this room today. And I just want to acknowledge you, if you would be willing, please, if you traveled more than 200 miles to get here today, would you mind standing if you can, or holding your hand up? More than 200 miles. Okay, the next group, how many of you crossed a state line, came from outside of California, including the people who just raised their hand? Wow. Okay. Awesome. And the next group, how many of you are now, or ever have been, or plan to be an educator of any kind? An educator, not necessarily a teacher, but an educator, somebody who works. Wow, look around, look around.
Even if you're retired.
Even if, oh, most certainly if you're retired. Cheryl, this is you too.
That's right.
That's right. That's right. Okay, let's give ourselves a round of applause because we are here because this is what we care about. We care about learning together how to be effective, not teachers, as they said this morning, but educators, people who are building communities in which we are all learning together how to take on the world in which we are, our children are being placed now, and we ourselves are trying to find our ways. My name is Kip Dawson. I have the honor of being a middle school teacher in Pittsburgh Public Schools, and I also had the honor of being at the last conference of the Free Minds, Free People Conference 2 years ago in Chicago, where I was on a panel called Social Justice Unionism with two of the people who are in this room with us right now. Just want to point them out. Michelle Strader-Gunderson, a leader of the Chicago Teachers Union, which is and then Anthony Cody, who is one of my mentors in many ways, who is an education justice organizer right now after retiring from being a teacher in the Oakland Public Schools. So really proud to have him here. At that conference I had a dream, and that was, or soon after that, there were three people in my life who had been mentors to me in many ways who did not know each other very well at that time. All of whom were involved in social justice work in the area of restorative justice. And my dream then was what you were about to see here today. These people coming together who have, since that time, actually found a community, building a community among themselves in addition to the other communities in which they work, that is based on not only working for restorative justice, but having been social justice activists for more than half a century, each of them. And when we presented the idea to the conference organizers of doing a panel of these three people, which I kind of got dragged into too, on restorative justice, and they looked at our bios, they said, a lot of people can talk about restorative justice, but what you guys have to offer is the longevity of your struggle and what you've learned from that. So what you're going to hear today are presentations from the decades in which these people have been teachers, or in the case of one of our speakers, an activist working with people who she is helping to teach as a minister for a long period of time. And I want to give you a little background on myself, and then we'll get to them, because that's what we're doing. I have the honor of being the oldest person here, but the four of us who are on the panel in front of you graduated from Berkeley High School within 3 years of each other, all four of us. And we didn't know each other as a group then. I'm kind of the person who got to know each of them separately, but I will tell you a little bit about myself in relationship to them. My social justice activism came actually from my grandparents and parents, who passed on to us a legacy of standing up for what is right, which is multifaceted, which I won't go into. But my first conscious political activity myself came in the 1950s. When my mother, our mother, several of my siblings are here, three right there, our mother was a member of the Communist Party and a factory worker. We were living in the projects that used to be called Cordonesis Village, and she was being hounded by the FBI because she was a unionist who stood up not only for working people, but for black people, and for justice on the workplace, and way ahead of her time, for equal pay for women. And for those reasons, she was hounded by the FBI because this was the McCarthy period. So my first instance of learning about social justice was standing up no matter what kind of persecution could happen. And the persecution I most remember from the 1950s was when Ethel and Julius Rosenberg were executed in 1953, and to me, that could have been our mom. It could have been our mom. So, and yet, my little mom, who was about my height, would stand up to the the FBI agents that came to our doors and pretty much tell them where to go. And not only did she do that, but so did her neighbors and coworkers who respected her when they were come to by FBI agents to try and get them to talk about our mom. They would not do it. And they would come and tell her instead what was going on. But then the 50s blended into the 60s. And that's when that one came into my life. This one, who was known back then as Tracy Sims, who's in Tamam Moncourt, she and I, and her cousin, Cherie, who was Cheryl Collier back then, the three of us went to junior high school together, Burbank, for those of you who are old enough to remember its existence, and then Berkeley High School. And not only did we go to school together, but we were agitators together because we were enlivened by and emboldened by the civil rights movement that had hit big in the South at that time, and by the sit-ins that were going on in Tennessee and North Carolina, those gray students who sat in to be served coffee in Crest and Woolworth stores, and who we would look at them on our little tiny black and white screen TVs and say, you know what, if they can do it, we can. And so she and I and our friend Brenda Malvo, who is with us, although we haven't been able to find her for decades, but she's here too. The three of us started a group at Berkeley High School that her mom had us call the Anti-Anti Club. That turned into, remember that, turned into Students for Equality, that first took on the segregated sororities and fraternities seating in the Berkeley High School quad, and then turned into an organizer for the picketing that was going on at Berkeley, Woolworths, in solidarity with students all over the country who were doing the same thing, picketing in solidarity with those who were being arrested for trying to get served a cup of coffee in the South. And from there, we went on to San Francisco, where she, who's going to speak to you, became, at 18, the head of the Ad Hoc Committee to End Discrimination in Hiring, which organized the picketing and sit-ins that landed us all in jail a whole bunch of times, and that got jobs for the first time, signed contracts, jobs for black people in establishments that would not hire them until then, including the hotels and the car dealerships in California. And that's where I got what I still have, really. In addition to my mom's determination to make the world a better place, I knew that it was going to happen. Because anyone, and how many of you had a chance to be a part of the civil rights movement? Okay, and wouldn't you say, and I'd have to say, that once you were in that movement and you saw people coming together to stand together for justice and to put themselves out of their own little personal space into the space of a community coming together to make things different, you couldn't leave that. It became a part of my blood, and that's why I'm a teacher today. That's the 60s. Very briefly, on to the 70s. The 70s for me was Vietnam and the anti-war movement, which also was victorious and a wonderful place to be. And again, that blood that came to me from the civil rights movement got reinforced by the power of the anti-war movement. And then, of course, here comes the women's movement. And I would happen to be very luckily placed to be able to be a part of the second wave of feminism and the victories that were won there. Again, a statement. You can stand outside of your own personal space and find people like you everywhere and join together and make a difference and make change. And then in the 1980s, it was reinforced for me in a new place. I was an underground coal miner from 1979 to 1992. And there I got a chance to work with women coal miners and with the United Mine Workers of America, a union in which I learned the same thing in a different kind of setting. You come together with people who have similar needs, and you can reach out and find people like you everywhere and make a difference. And from the 1992, I got laid off from the coal mines. I got a chance to become what I'd always thought I was going to be when I started out at San Francisco State, Back in 1962, a teacher, which I now am, and if you ever want to be any place that can infuse you with a knowledge that the world can be a better place, it's every day being, in my case, with middle school kids who come to you not yet ruined by the society that would try to keep them down, but ready to think of themselves in a different kind of way if they have that opportunity, and to take on the struggles themselves. And I have to say that my teaching and my going in that direction came from this one here. Because Joan was a teacher way before and she helped me to get there. And now I'm going to go to our other panelists, because yesterday I learned again how much this one, my sister, Cheryl, has meant in my life. And this is my transition to the other people. This one was the first one to come into my life. Cheryl's father and married my mom in 1952. And we got Cheryl, I got Cheryl, so did Terry, and so did Lynn, in the bargain, along with our brother Bobby, who's no longer with us, but he is with us today. He's with us. And Cheryl and I, growing up at the same time, practically the same age. 2 years doesn't make a difference. A year and a half doesn't make a difference when you get to be a little past 15, or even before that. We grew up in two parallel ways. She's black, I'm white. Her life has been, our lives are parallel. She has lived a life that has been directly impacted by the scourge and the sickness of our society, the racism that has ruined things for many people and that we are taking on now. And I've learned so much from this woman, from the things that she has gone through and the things that she has taught so many people, and you'll hear a little bit from her today, about what our future is. Our future, all of us together, not just those of us in this room, but people who care about humanity, has got to be one in which this scourge that was imposed on us at the beginning of slavery coming to this country in order to keep us from one another is now being tackled by a whole new generation of amazing people. How many of you have heard of Bree Newsom? Bree Newsom, the young woman who took the Confederate flag down.
Yes, kind of, yes.
She represents, for me, a continuation of everything that was beautiful in the life that I have been lucky enough to live. So, without further ado, we move now to our next speaker, which is you, right? Okay, so thank you very much for coming together with us today. It's a joy to be here with you.
Well, my good buddy from Burbank already introduced me, and I'm going to have to get a PowerPoint expert. You, hit the button? But she already introduced me because I'm originally from the Bay Area. Went to elementary school in Oakland, junior high, and high school in Berkeley, and then moved to San Francisco and lived there for several years, and was an activist there. But we're going to fast forward to Newark, New Jersey, because that's where I am now. I'm a retired teacher, taught in the Newark public school system for 23 years. Prior to that, I was a music teacher for a couple of years, but the main reason I decided to retire is because what was happening in education at the time and the total disrespect for teachers. Let me see.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry. Oh.
Jim is our technical person. This is amazing.
Okay. But while she's bringing it up, while she's bringing it up, Newark, New Jersey. It's about 250,000 people. It's really predominantly minority. 60% are, about 60% are black, and there's about 30% Hispanic, and then 10% other. Newark has, of course, high unemployment. We now have a decimated education system thanks to the superintendent that, thank God, retired. Not retired,